Once upon a time, and this is a long time ago, once upon a time, there was a demon, Vritta. And this Vritta had extended and enfolded himself all around the earth, around the entire atmosphere of the globe, such that the light of the sun was being blocked and a huge drought had taken place on earth. Everybody was deeply thirsty and in darkness, and they were in total despair. Perhaps, I don't know, it's almost like the modern corporations of this time that have enfolded themselves around the world. This has happened many, many a time before. And so, in this despair, they called out to Indra, asking Indra, Indra, please, can you help us? Indra heard their call. He has a bag of thunderbolts. So he took a thunderbolt out and shot it down. And the place that it hit the demon, his body fell apart as petals fall off a rose that is ripe and ready down to the earth. Just sheaves. It disintegrated into space. That powerful this thunderbolt was. And then the waters of life returned back, nourishing the fields and the rivers. Everybody was celebrating, and everyone gave great thanks and homage to Lord Indra. Indra, how great you are. Indra, how great you are, they said. So Indra, seeing this, thought to himself, what a good boy am I. What a good Indra am I. What a great Indra am I. He looked around at his palace and he said, I need to build a palace fit for an Indras. I need a palace like this. So he called Vishwakarma. And Vishwakarma is the architect of the gods, the craftsman of the gods. He can build anything. When I say anything, he can build a universe. You look into one flower, think about the intricacy of the construction of a single flower. How marvelous it is, of a stone. And who is it in Indian culture? These are all created by the devas, the divine intelligences. Flower is not just some inert object. There's a divine intelligence, a creative intelligence that could create it. If we can create a painting, if we can create a building, or is there not a creative intelligence behind nature itself? All these devas. And who do these devas employ to build their beautiful visions? Vishwakarma, the craftsman of the gods, of the devas. So he calls Vishwakarma, no slouch. And he says, Vishwakarma, I want to build a palace. And he spreads out all his designs. Fantastic imagination. But for Vishwakarma, this is all doable. In 1 year, he's built this fantastic palace for Indra. So Indra comes and looks at it, but over the course of that year, every time he keeps thinking to himself, I'm so great. I'm so great, I should have more, right? So he goes to Vishwakarma. He says, Vishwakarma, I've been thinking, I need to have a garden like this. I should have another chamber like that. I need nice pools and gardens. Every time he's coming and he's going to Vishwakarma, says, building now this, now that, now this. Vishwakarma says, this guy's so into himself at this rate, it will never stop. I have other things to do. So he thinks, I have to get some help, because you can't just tell Indra no, right? So then he goes to Brahma. So Brahma is there, and he's sitting on a lotus leaf. And this lotus leaf is growing out from the navel of Vishnu. And Vishnu is dreaming all the worlds into being. And Brahma is opening and closing his eyes. And each time he does, a world comes into being and returns again. So he goes to Brahma, the creator. He says, Brahma, Indra's really gotten ahead of himself and I don't know what to do. I need some help. He told him the story. So Brahma says, go, I'll take care of it. So then, next day, a beautiful blue-black boy comes to see the gates of Indra's palace. And he has a retinue of children around him, all very merry. And he tours the palace and then comes into the hall where Indra is, and Indra sees him, this beautiful boy, just radiant, lustrous skin, and his voice was soft like rolling thunder. And he says, I've come here because I've heard that there is an Indra building a palace unlike any Indras before him. And looking around, I can say, this is true. Indra's taking a bat. He says, what? Did you say Indra's before me? What are you talking about? He says, yes, Indra's before you, don't you know? He said, this whole world is all happening within the dream of Vishnu. But within that, every time a Brahma opens his eyes, a world comes into being. And that world lasts for 432,000 years, which is the life of one Brahma. And in that time, he opens and closes his eyes just like you two blink. So every time his eyes open and close, a world comes into being and disappears, comes into being and disappears. And every time a Brahma dies, the lotus goes back and the whole galaxy disappears. And then another lotus comes forth, another Brahma is born. And again, his eyes open and close, and new galaxies are born. And every single one of these worlds is ruled by an Indra. You can go to the wise men in your court. They could count every grain of sand on all the beaches and every drop of water in the oceans, but they could never count the number of Indras that have come to rule all the worlds that have come into being. And Indras, he realizes this, he's taken aback. So, in this moment, there's some ants that are parading across the floor. And this boy begins to chuckle, right? And Indra says, what are you laughing at? He says, no, trust me, you don't want to know. He says, I asked, so teach. Because in the yogic culture, usually in that time, Upanishads, you would come to sit, and if you were saying, I want to learn, it's taught. They're not proselytizers, not preachers going around saying, I don't care whether you want to hear me or not, I have something to tell you, right? You have to say, please ask. Then when the teaching flows forth. So then he says, all these ants, former Indras, all of them. He says, what happened? He says, they all at some point took a thunderbolt, they threw it and hit a Vritta, and they thought, what a good boy am I. And then whoop, they came down and became ants. So now Indra's completely shot, right? At that time, another yogi comes wandering in with an old parasol lamp and a curious constellations of hair on his chest. And very interesting old yogi. And now the Indra says, what are you doing here, Yogiji? He says, I heard that there was a palace being built by an Indra, unlike any other Indra before. He says, oh no, right? He says, I don't understand. Life is so temporary. It's just like building your house on a bridge. Why would you build your house on a bridge? He says, Yogiji, I'm understanding this, but what is this thing on your chest? This curious constellation of hairs. He says, you see, every time a hair falls off my chest, it means that an Indra has just passed away. And the hair keeps coming back, but it's falling out all the time. And Indra realizes, oh man, that's it, I'm going to be a yogi now. So he decides to abandon the palace. And he's saying, I'm going to just sit and just focus my mind on the feet of Vishnu. So he decides to go and do this, but Indra had a very beautiful wife, Indrani. And Indrani knew that Indra was reacting. And he says, this is not him. So she goes to the head priest. She says, please, can you please speak to Indra? So he goes to Indra. He says, Indra, I've instructed you upon politics and rulership. But now I realize that that alone has not been enough. So it's good that you're practicing yoga. It is time to study the yogic teachings, learn to train your mind to become balanced, harmonious, humble, and generous and pure. At the same time, remember who you are. You are Indra, Lord of the gods. You have incarnated here to serve the purpose of being an Indra, and you have a responsibility to all the people who rely upon you. So find balance. Be a yogi, but also be a ruler. And I have prepared this text on love for you so that you can unite with your wife in a sacred union, so that even in the midst of the duties of the world, you can come into union and experience for a moment that bliss which is touched by the yogas. And so he gives him this text. And so Indra returns and, with more humility, has learned his lesson and continues to rule his kingdom. And that is the story.